going to do all, I'll have all three of these go. Okay, today we're going to interview Larry Ortiz. Larry worked in Burma on the new Burma Road, or they call it the Stillwell Road, maybe.
Stillwell.
During World War II. So Larry, nice to have you here.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Tell me, where and when were you born?
I was born September 30th, 1923, in Detroit, Michigan.
And what did your dad do?
My dad was a stonecutter. My parents are Spaniards from the north of Spain in Santander, and he was a stonecutter, and that's what he did in Detroit. He did some pretty nice engraving in some of the new buildings in downtown Detroit.
Oh, okay. Where in Spain were they from, did you say?
Santander.
How do you spell that?
S-A-N-T-A-N-D-E-R.
S-A-N-T-A-N.
D-E-R.
Is that all one word?
Yeah, all one word.
Santander.
Santander.
Santander. What does that mean?
It's up near France.
Does it mean something?
It's a proper name. It doesn't have a...
It's not Saint somebody or something like that.
Right, no. No, it's all one word, Santander.
Okay. Well, when did they both, were they married over there before they came over?
No, they met, they came over with their respective families. Before I was born, they came in with their respective families to the new country, and as so many Spaniards did. And they met, well, I think they knew one another in Spain, but in the United States, they were married, and I was born in Detroit.
Okay, and why did they leave Spain, and when did they leave Spain?
They left Spain in it had to be, let's see, they had birthdays in it had to be maybe just prior to World War I suppose. Yeah, just prior to World War I. I was born in 23. They hadn't been in the United States very long, and so that was it. I'd say just say 1917, something like that, 1916, in that area.
And what was the reason that they came to us?
Yeah, that was before the end of the World War.
Right, it was during the war.
Yeah, during the war. The reason they came over? I think, like so many immigrants from Europe, they were just looking for a better life, yes. And they wanted to bring their trades over because they came as, then my parents were, of course, very young, but my grandfather was a stonecutter, and they wanted to bring their trades to the United States, and because they had heard, of course, that the United States was the land of the free and a better life and so forth. So they wanted to make a new life, as many Spaniards and Italians and Portuguese and everybody from the Mediterranean did come to various parts of the United States to start their new life.
Do you know if it took them very long to be able to come? I mean, as far as, was there quotas that so many people could come from
that?
There
I'm not sure of, but I know that they came through Ellis Island. I do know that. But I don't know what the waiting period might have been or the difficulty in getting over.
And what was your father's name?
Juan, J-U-A-N.
Ortiz. And what was your mother's name and her maiden name?
Her first name is Alejandra, A-L-E-J-A-N-D-R-O. Alejandra.
D-R-O.
D-R-A.
D-R-A, right, yes.
D-R-A. And her name is Bedia, B-E-D-I-A.
So the people in that part of Spain are fairly light-complected?
Yes. Spain is like that. In the north, the people are they have my complexion, and as you work your way south into Spain, they are darker. In the south, of course, of Spain, the Moors, as you know, came to Spain and as far as Toledo in Spain, and Toledo was the capital of the Moors for 700 years. So the Moorish influence from Africa, from North Africa, is very evident in the Spaniard of the South.
Yes. And there are different dialects, I think, in Spain. What's the one that they spoke in that
Castilian.
area? Castilian, yeah.
Castilian Spanish.
And did you learn to speak that as well?
I did. Since my parents didn't speak much English or almost any English, I spoke Spanish at home, of course, always, forever, and English as I went out to school and with my playmates and all that.
Do you remember it difficult learning English, or did it just because you were around other kids that spoke
No,
it, it just kind of
I don't
came pretty
remember it
easily?
being difficult because at that age, I guess it just comes natural. When you're just a youngster like that, you're not afraid of making any mistakes in the language, so it worked out just fine.
So there was a time, I think, especially here in California, where they felt they needed special teachers for kids that families only spoke Spanish. But it seemed like if they were like you were around other little kids that spoke English all the time, that they would pick it up
Yes.
pretty quickly.
Yes, I didn't have any difficulty in school. I remember that in grammar school. Now, my parents had some difficulty because as all other foreigners did too, that coming from those countries over to the United States, they not speaking English was a hardship, you know, and they had a tough time getting along without speaking the language, but they picked it up little by little and became citizens. They acquired enough English to be able to pass the examinations and become American citizens. But I didn't have any difficulty with school kids in my classes. I was speaking both languages fluently.
Did you live in? Were there a lot of other Spanish people that lived in the neighborhood that you lived in?
In Detroit, at that time, there were in my neighborhood. It was pretty mixed. There's Spanish, as far as mostly immigrants, but Spanish, German, Irish, etc. But there was a large Spanish colony in Detroit, and we would. I remember we have Sunday picnics. There are a lot of nice parks and lakes around Detroit, and usually on a Sunday, on a nice summer or spring Sunday, the Spaniards would all meet at a certain lake. The word would get around, well, the picnic next Sunday is going to be at Lake such and such, and we'd all end up there, and everybody brings picnic baskets and etc. And we always had a real nice time. They were all stuck together, naturally. The Spaniards all got together, just as Americans would, and if they were in a foreign country, they'd have their clubs and get together. So the Spaniards did too.
And the Spaniards, like you're Castilian, and somebody from down south, you were just as close to them as you were, or did you stay around people that
Not
mostly
as
Castilian?
close. Not as close. Our Spanish friends were the ones from the north because many of them, being such a small area up there, many of them already knew one another, and the families just drifted over one at a time. And then when a family would come over and the word would get around that they went to Detroit, well, then other family, oh, I know where they live, and oh yes, well so they would come over, and then another would come over. But they wouldn't necessarily move into the same neighborhood because the housing was limited and so forth.
And what street did you live on? Where did you live?
I lived on
neighborhood?
the west part of Detroit, on a street called let's see, the name escapes me right now, but I'll think of it probably. But it was, but I went to Western High School. In Detroit, the high schools, depending on what part of the city you like, Western is in Western Detroit, and not Southwestern High Schools in Southwestern Detroit, etc. Northern, and so have. I went to Western High School.
And what grade school did you go to?
I went to a grade school called McKinstry, McKinstry, I think, McKinstry.
And Did you go to a junior high school or middle school or something?
Yes, middle school was called Ninus, I think it's Neinas, middle school, Ninus, intermediate.
Yeah. Was your family Catholic?
Yes, my family are Catholics.
Did what parish did you belong to then?
Well, the religion, the Spaniards that came over, many of the Spaniards that came over, Spain, of course, is a Catholic country, and at that time, Spain was going through a transition in that many of the people were not losing faith in God, but many of the people were losing faith in the church itself. Some thought that the priests were a little unfair in some villages, that the priests might have been a little bit unfair, a little bit harsh with the people. And some Spaniards began to think it was better if they ever left their village, like my parents did, if they ever left their village and came to a new country, that they might just not get back into the strict Catholicism again with the priest and that same situation. So they didn't. They didn't. They still were great believers in God, of course, but they didn't feel that it was a matter of having to be church going, that if you didn't go to church, you were going to hell. They didn't think that. So they were strong believers in God, but they felt that God understood. Many Spaniards were like that. Many Spaniards, not just my family.
Yeah. I think around that time is when the Mexican Revolution was, and I think where they kind of tried to get rid of the Catholic religion, basically, and killed the priest and stuff like that. Did any of that go on in Spain at the same time? They didn't have any.
Of course, the Spanish Civil War had not come along yet, and
right.
None of that occurred to my knowledge. No,
yeah.
No. The church itself was revered by the people, and they're great believers in the Catholic Church, but they just, for some reason or other, in some villages, they just didn't like the priests.
Yeah. Did you have any brothers and sisters?
I had a sister.
What was her name?
Herminia, Herminia.
And how was she? Was she older or younger than you?
Herminia was 4 years older than me.
And has she passed away?
She has passed away. She passed away in California.
Just
in Southern California. That was about 10 years ago. And my parents are both buried in the same, also with her in Southern California. Both my mother and father.
You grew up probably during the Depression. What was that like for your family?
Well, for our family, it wasn't as bad because being that my father was a stone cutter, and there was work. There was work in the public works projects in Detroit, like many other cities. They needed him very much, and so he had work. Now, I think, as I remember the story, he was working for the handsome sum of $11 a day, which then was a lot. I mean, you think, oh, $11 a day. I mean, a long day of stone cutting where he had to wear his mask and so forth, and which was punishing. It was artistic, but it was a very punishing career and occupation.
Where did they get the stone?
From where the stone I think was mainly from the quarries of Vermont and New Hampshire. I don't think there was much stone coming from Europe.
Yeah, the reason I ask, I'm from southern Indiana, and around Bloomington and Bedford in that area, there's a lot of, in fact, there's a high school. They call them their stone cutters.
Yeah.
in Bedford, yeah.
I should mention that, see, that was a stop for them. When they came from Spain, their first stop was Barre, Vermont.
Oh.
And
what is the name of it?
Barre. Barre, Vermont is near the granite quarries of Vermont. And that they went there, of course, to cut stone. And all of these Spaniards that my parents knew. And then, but my parents moved on to Detroit because they knew that Detroit was in dire need of stone cutters, and they were paying well, and of course it carried them through the Depression.
Yeah. Did you work as a kid? Did you have odd jobs and things like that while you were going to school?
No, just paperboy stuff, yeah.
What paper did you deliver? Do you remember?
The Detroit News. Remember, it was the daily was a penny, and the Sunday paper was 3 cents.
Did you play a lot of sports and stuff like that? When you
I
were a kid?
played a lot of sports. We lived across the street from.
Did you play soccer?
oh.
Did you always play
Some soccer, but not very
Not
much
like they
really.
did.
After that, the street the street that I couldn't remember when I was very young is not the street where I really grew up. The street that I grew up on was called Military, the Military Street, and but it was a very nice neighborhood with a playground. Let's see, an elementary school was across the street with a very large playground, and it had ball fields and so forth, which was heaven for me because that's where I spent all my time, was across the street in the playground. And depending on the season, we'd either play touch football over there, or even maybe a little tackle football in the season, or baseball in the season, or whatever was the season. In the middle of winter, we'd even make an ice rink over there. We'd stack up the snow and fill it with water and so on. And so we'd play our hockey games across the street too. It was a playground for all sports and all seasons.
Yeah, I hadn't really heard of that, of doing that. I guess that would work if you took all the snow and packed it around the side, and
Yeah,
put
for
water in
walls.
it, and it would freeze. That you
Yeah.
did. I never thought of
That's
that.
what we did. Of
Wow.
course, we had all the kids in the neighborhood helping, so we made a nice rink
Yeah.
and had good games.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
So, what year did you graduate from high school?
High school, I graduated 1941.
Okay. So this is like June or May or June.
June 41.
Okay. Now, about this time, you were aware of the war in Europe going on, I assume.
Yeah,
And
sure.
I guess the Spanish Civil War
The Spanish Civil War
was even prior to that,
Right.
1930.
1936, 1939.
Right. Did you have relatives that were involved in that Spanish Civil War that you know of?
Not that I know of, but the Spaniards in all parts of the United States, and including Detroit, of course, had clubs, groups, and that would send money. As you know, there was a brigade formed here in the United States called the Abraham Lincoln Brigade that went and fought in Spain for the Loyalists. And so all the Spaniards that were here, most of them, I should say, most of the Spaniards that were living here in the United States supported the Republican government, which were the Loyalists. And as you know, it was General Franco, who was Army Chief of Staff, that was attempting and did overthrow the duly elected Republican government in Spain. Now, that's what initiated the Spanish Civil War, and the Spaniards in this country were financially supporting the Abraham Lincoln Brigade and the Loyalist parties, Loyalist government.
So they were against Franco.
Yes, they were. Not all Spaniards, of course.
Right.
Some felt that the army had. The reason that General Franco revolted against the elected government in Spain was because they felt that the elected government in Spain that was coming in 1936, was infiltrated by communists, and of course, Spain being a Catholic country, and the army being anti-communist, those forces wouldn't permit that. So, hence, civil war.
The communists, the Spanish communists, were they similar to the Bolsheviks? I mean, to the Russian communists?
The Russians were, yes, the Russians were infiltrating or trying to, and infiltrate Spain. And during the Spanish Civil War, the loyalists were not only aided by the United States and supported politically by the United States and financially, and Great Britain and other countries were supporting the loyalists because that was the elected government. The Russians, the Russian government was also, together with the United States, together with Britain, and together with all, they were also helping the loyalists. But the Russians had something else in mind. The Russians had communism for Spain in mind.
And that I guess is what I was getting at is the Spanish citizens themselves that were fighting with the loyalists probably didn't necessarily want to have a communist country like Russia had.
Some might have.
Some probably did, but probably not all.
Yeah, some probably, but the majority would not. No,
Right.
They would not, because then, particularly in the 1930s, you couldn't. Spain was they were more Catholic than the Pope, and you couldn't have a communist government. Even it's unthinkable.
Well, you would think that because Russia was just about as Catholic as Spain was, I think, before the Tsar was overthrown. I mean, I don't know as
Yeah.
devoutly maybe as,
Yeah.
and maybe not Roman Catholic because they have other.
Yeah.
But okay. So you knew what was going on over there, and what were you thinking that perhaps the United States was going to get involved in this in 1941?
I wasn't sure that the United States would get involved militarily in the Spanish Civil War.
No, not that. I'm talking about this is 1941 now.
Oh.
In the World War II that's
In World
going
War
on.
II?
Yeah. I mean, I'm talking about when you got out of high school. Were you thinking that maybe war was imminent and that you might get involved with
I suppose because we were already sending a lot of supplies, of course, and after I was out of high school, and before going to the service, I went to work for Chrysler and their gun arsenal, and helping to build 40 millimeter anti-aircraft guns. So I was certainly knowing that we were in this thing, at least from a supply point of view, and I knew troops would probably follow, or I felt they would.
So Chrysler, when did they retool to start doing that, to build those guns?
Gee, I guess it was certainly. I think it was certainly before Pearl Harbor.
Right.
Yeah.
Was it?
But I can't remember the exact dates.
Yeah.
But our industry in Detroit was geared up with. They were geared up making some important war materials.
It's interesting. I was telling you these old Life magazines that we have from 1941. I've been reading them, the ones that we have, and what you're telling me is exactly right. I mean, when you look at this and you're reading it, it's no surprise that we were in. It seemed like they were.
Yeah.
All this was going on. They were beefing up the military and doing this, and it was like it was a foregone conclusion that we were going to be fighting pretty soon.
Mm-hmm.
And I had always kind of thought that Pearl Harbor was a big surprise, and now we're going to start. But it looks like they were getting ready. They knew it was going to happen at some point in time.
I think so.
So, what were you doing on December 7th, 1941 then?
December 7, 1941. It was a Sunday, of course, but and I think I was working. As I remember, I heard the news at Chrysler. So I think we were working 7 days a week, but maybe not all of us. Maybe I was not working Saturday or something like that. I might have been working certainly 5, probably 6, but I think I was at the plant, and I can't remember exactly. But that's what crosses my mind,
Yeah.
is at the gun arsenal.
Uh-huh. Where in Detroit was that plant?
That's in Highland Park, near Detroit.
Okay. So by this time, okay. Okay. Well, what happened then after December 7th? They were going to have a draft and all that. So
Yes. After December 7th, let's see. Sometime in well, I continued to work, of course, in the gun arsenal in '42, because I went into the service in March '43, and I guess it was toward the end of '42 that I wanted to enlist in the Navy, and I went down to Detroit's Naval Intelligence office, and I told them that I'd like to do some intelligence work, if it were possible, using my language, which of course was fluent Spanish. And they were interested, very interested in taking me and recruiting me and training me for some intelligence work, possibly for some intelligence work in wherever my Spanish could be useful to the Navy. And so I was proceeding along that line with them, and I think I was going to be sent. First, I'd have to enlist and then be sent to Great Lakes Naval Station for some training. And we got into early 1943, and it was about that time that President Roosevelt canceled or the government would not allow any more enlistments. You had to go, from that point forward, go through your draft board. That didn't mean you couldn't select the Navy, but they said you had to go through your draft board. And then I remember I was advised by Naval Intelligence Detroit that they couldn't do anything about it. I mean, there's nothing they could do, and now it was all up to me to go ahead and be drafted and select the Navy, and then start all over with my petition to do something in naval intelligence. Maybe yes, maybe no. Well, so I waited for the draft board, and the draft board happened, of course. And but by then, which was March of '43, by then I had changed my mind. At that age, of course, you change your mind a lot. But I had changed my mind, and I decided I wanted to go in the Army, and that's what I selected. Although I had my choice, because they said Army, Navy, after the physical and after being inducted, they said, well, what, do you want Army, Navy, or Marines? As they asked everybody. So I said Army.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and so where did you do your basic training then?
Then I went to, they sent me to, I was sent to Camp Callan, well, first, of course, in Camp Custer in Battle Creek, Michigan, that's just for a few days or a week or whatever. But then on to Camp Callan, C-A-L-L-A-N, in Southern California, not far from, just outside La Jolla, as a matter of fact.
Oh.
And now I guess it's a gorgeous golf course and so forth. But that's where I did my basic training, basic Army training. That was anti-aircraft there, but for me it was basic training.
Yeah. And then where'd you go from there?
And then the Army we got back into the intelligence mode again, and the Army thought that I'd be a good candidate to go to the University of Oregon under the Army Specialized Training Program to study Italian in real depth. That is, the Italian language, its history, its geography, its everything. Just immersed in Italian, and that's where I went, and I was immersed in Italian for 9 solid months. Coming out of there, they did a magnificent job. Coming out of there totally fluent in Italian, and I really knew Italy. And the purpose of all this was to again, we're getting back to the intelligence community, and the purpose of this was to do something like, not necessarily the thing, but something like interrogating Italian prisoners of war, which I later did interrogate an Italian prisoner of war just by mistake, but just by happenstance. But that was the purpose. And this program was cut short by 3 months. Although I graduated, they gave me the graduation certificate. It was cut short by 3 months, and because we were because our armed forces were having it pretty tough already in lots of parts of the world, shortage of manpower. They had to take people like me and get us overseas as fast as they could get us over, and throw us into the breach, and one way or another. So I ended up at Camp Crowder, Missouri. Camp Crowder, Missouri. That's a Signal Corps camp where I did Signal Corps training, and then of course I shipped over to India, Burma.
Okay, tell me a little bit about Signal Corps. I mean, what's the purpose of it?
Well, it's strictly, well, not strictly, but its main purpose is communications of all types. It's vital, of course, that you have your communications set up in combat, or even in behind the lines, or anywhere in the system. And this took in everything. It took in radio, took in teletype, took in any form of communications. The Signal Corps was involved. Not only in installing equipment and so forth, but also to make sure that you got your lines. For example, on the Burma Road, poles and wires had to be strung. There's 1,000 miles of road, and we had to have that done. We had mainly, well, we'll probably get to this, but we had battalions that certain battalions would do the heavy work. They were usually black battalions do the heavy work, like putting in the poles and stringing the lines, and then we had linemen, and we had people who had to establish these message centers, and we had to set up these message centers throughout the combat area and thereon into China. And we had to, and of course all orders came, that's the way orders got there, in combat orders, and what to do and what not to do, and who's going to do it. And it was up to the enemy to destroy our communications so that we wouldn't know what to do.
Did you learn Morse code and stuff like that?
I did, because our I've forgotten it, but all the very good training. But our messages were all the messages were coded, unless they were just something absolutely simple, and that almost meaningless, and we didn't send many of those. Everything had an importance, so their messages were coded.
Okay, how would you code a message? What are the various means of doing that?
Well, we coded message. I can't talk about the code room but the messages. That's the way the messages went out. They would look.
If you looked at the message, what would you see if you were to?
If you looked at the message, you'd see lines of mainly in groups of five codes at a time. It might be A, F, G, L, but Y, and then next one would be Z, Z, Q, and
So it was like I mean, it wasn't
letter
like
coded.
Huh?
Yeah, these would be groups of letters, and that
It was just like
you had to
it looked like garbled stuff.
strictly garbled,
Uh-huh.
and you had to at the other end know how to decode it.
It wouldn't be like it's gone with the wind, and this means one word means something else or something like
Yeah,
that. It
nothing-
wouldn't be real words.
Anything you looked at made no sense.
Okay.
It looked like a bunch of garbled. They were all letters. They were all English letters, and but they were in groups. I mean, there wouldn't be anything like 15 characters, usually broken into five and as I remember 5 and 6. I didn't work in the code room. We had that was an absolute secret, and we had people, only a few that worked in the code room, and they coded and decoded it, and we didn't ask any questions.
When did you find out you would be going overseas and where you would be going?
Let's see. I guess it was in '44. Let's call it the summer of '44.
But no, you graduated from high school in 1941, right?
41.
Right, and then it was 1943 that you started training?
In 1943, I was in the
Right.
service.
He was working at the
Because
Chrysler.
Because you were at the Chrysler?
I was at Chrysler Gun Arsenal.
Okay, so that gave you
And he
extra
tried
time?
to enlist, and then they wouldn't. They were
Okay.
going to. Then they wouldn't let us. We had to
Yeah.
wait to be drafted.
Okay.
Yeah, I tried.
Got that.
I tried to enlist
Thank you.
when I was. I guess I was working at Chrysler Gun Arsenal when I was talking to the United States Navy in downtown
Okay.
Detroit, the
Okay.
Naval Intelligence. Nice people, very nice people.
Yeah.
And I just got.
Now, by this time, you're getting ready to go overseas. Were you married yet, or did you have a fiance?
No, I was not married.
And you didn't have a girlfriend or anything?
Well, I had friends, yeah.
Okay, but no
no
such-
engagement or anything like
Okay.
that.
And so, you knew you were going to go to Burma? I mean, when you got your
No,
order? Or you-
no. We were sent from Camp Crowder, Missouri, to Camp Anza, ANZA, near here.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Right.
And that was our staging area. And we were sent. I forget. We were only there a short while, like a matter of a week or so. And
You probably didn't come to the desert. while you were-
No, we did. We went to the Hollywood Canteen.
Oh, okay. Tell me about that. I can't imagine why you go to the Hollywood Canteen instead of coming out here and hiking around the mountains, trails and stuff.
So then.
Tell me about the Hollywood Canteen. You hear so much about it. What was it like? I mean,
Very nice. I enjoyed it, but I can't remember now. I met some stars, but I can't remember who they all were now.
Uh-huh.
But they were very nice.
Was it like a great big room or something like that? or-
Yeah, it was a big. It was a nice place where you could have some refreshments and you could dance and meet stars, and it was like a USO, and it was very nice. It was, and the Hollywood stars, the people, like the nice people, like Betty Grable and company and so forth, they'd show up and greet the guys and meet you, and it was fun. It just just something to keep your morale going. But anyway, after Camp Enza, after those few days in Camp Enza, we were we were transported to L.A. Harbor, to Los Angeles Harbor, where we caught our troop ship.
Do you remember the name of it?
They're going over. It was the SS McCrae, and I think that's the General McCrae. I think it's MCCRE.
Could be there's different ways. MCREA is one, MCRAY is.
I think it was without the Y.
Yeah. Like Joel McRae.
I know that coming home, I came home on the Marine Jumper, but this was the General McRae, and it might have been MCCREA. But at any rate, we boarded there in Los Angeles Harbor, and we headed down out, and we went to Melbourne, Australia. That was the first stop, only for supplies. Going across the entire trip took 42 days to get to our final destination, which was Calcutta. But our first stop, our only stop, was in Melbourne, Australia, and that was for supplies. We had to zigzag an awful lot when we got closer.
Were you in a convoy?
Some of the time. And we had to do a lot of zigzagging. About every 3 minutes we were changing course because of Japanese submarines.
Were there any alerts or?
Yes.
Were there?
Yes.
So submarines were seen. Were any
Well, they
attacks?
thought the Navy wouldn't tell us, but we thought so. Well, I mean, we think so, but they managed to get around it, and we were in Melbourne for a couple of days, but we didn't. They wouldn't let us off the troop ship, and then we went on from there to Calcutta. We went up the Hooghly River and into Calcutta, and there, of course, the Red Cross and nice people were awaiting us, and donuts and coffee and things, but we were immediately boarded on a narrow gauge on a train, a narrow gauge railway, and sent up immediately. We didn't stay in Calcutta 5 minutes, and we were sent right on up. Final destination, India, Burma, Assam, ASSAM. Assam province on India-Burma border, and that's where the Stillwell Road.
Now, is that in India or?
That's India.
Yeah.
And Lido, Ledo, is in Assam, and that's where the road began. That's where the Stillwell Road begins.
So you went to.
We were right there.
Lido, Lido is a town in Assam.
We were short. Went short of Lido, and we were in another message center. But that was the trail. The communications, as I remember them, were mainly coming up from New Delhi, Calcutta up into Assam, along the Burma Road, where we had some message centers along the Stillwell/Burma Road and into Kunming, China, which that was a road.
Okay, let me run through this again. Okay, you came from New Delhi to Calcutta.
The communications, yeah. New
Okay.
Delhi, Calcutta, then up, you can just say up into Assam, up into the province of Assam, and from Assam onward on the Burma Road, the New Burma Road we call it, because that's the Stillwell/Burma Road, the New Burma Road to Kunming, China.
Okay, to Kunming, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Now, so when you got there, the New Burma Road, was it complete?
It was.
Or let's back up a little bit. Let's talk about the old Burma Road. I mean, was there always a road there?
Yeah,
or
there was an old Burma Road that started in Rangoon and went up to Rangoon in the south of Burma, and went up to Mandalay in central Burma, and then onward to China, and from there. That was a road, of course. That was not for the war. That was before the war, and that was a road for commerce, but it served the Japanese well for transporting military supplies. And when the Japanese took all of Burma, there was no way there was no way for us, I'm talking about allies,
Mhm.
no way for the allies to support the Chinese. They were an ally too. So there was no way to support them. So we had to do two things. One is we had to do an airlift, which was flying the hump. And I think they had route, I think they had several routes like A, B, and C routes that they would fly, depending on how high they had to go. Because the Japanese interception was serious, you know, they shoot them down, and the jungles there ended up with a lot of our pilots and down in the jungles. So they were flying different routes depending on the interference, the interception by the Japanese. So that was flying supplies over the hump was one way. Tough, but it was one way. With C-47s and mainly C-47s. Then establishing, because we couldn't use the Burma Road, they had it. So establishing driving the Japanese out of northern Burma first. You didn't have to get them all the way out of Burma, just drive them out of northern Burma, and start your Stillwell / Burma Road. So you could start a road in India, in Lido, and go across over to the Burma Road in the north of Burma and onward to Kunming. But you had to fight your way. They had to fight their way through there with the Japanese out first, and then build it at the same time.
Mhm.
And that's what they were doing. And when I got there, I guess it was, I can't remember the exact dates, but I guess they were just about finishing and mopping up there in the north and getting supplies over to China.
Okay, so the new one started at Lido?
Yes.
Okay, and where did it connect with the old Burma Road then? Or is that what it did?
It connected with the old Burma Road, and it had to be somewhere around Bamo. I think, or somewhere around Bamo was the connection. I have that little map. I have a little map that shows it.
It's a
Oh,
secret.
yeah. Not that map, but
Oh,
it's
well, I'm sorry.
let's see here.
Oh, here, Stillwell Road.
Right,
yeah.
Stillwell Road. There we go. This was done by Signalcorps, by the way.
Oh.
I think both these books were done by us, by Signalcorps. Lido. Yeah. These are the milestones, but I thought I'd show you a map. There's a map in here. Yeah, there we go. Rangoon to Mandalay, and then old road, and then Mandalay over through Lashio and up and through here. So
Oh, that's what through last year. I
yeah,
remember that,
yeah, and then over here to Kunming. Now, we had to, since the Japanese controlled all of this, we had to start a new road. Here we are, Lido,
Yeah.
Stillwell Road coming down this way,
Right.
and hooking on pretty close to Lashio in this area. Hooking up north of Lashio. Yeah. Here's Bamo. I said Bamo, but I was a little too soon. Here's Bamo,
Uh-huh.
and then it went a little farther, hooked on right here, right after Bamo, the Stillwell Road,
Yeah.
and then picked up on the old road over to Kunming. So you had to get the Japanese out of this part of Burma though, in order to do that.
Yeah, I think I had a little map, but that's gonna be too far. This is pretty good. I wonder if I can. That's a little. There's a little map. There's a map, but it's pretty small. Burma's right in that little blue over under China. I can do a little better close up on that, so we can get
That's
a little bit of an idea, kind of what the area we're talking about. Maybe you can use this little for a pointer here, and I'll do a little quick.
Of course, here's Burma,
Right.
but there's not enough detail. There's Kunming.
Yeah.
Well, there's a little detail. Yeah, here's Lido,
Uh-huh.
and here it is. Here's the road, and over to Kunming.
Right.
That's 1,000 miles from Lido to Kunming, right there.
Uh-huh. And the old road would have been.
And the old road would have been from down here in Rangoon to Mandalay and up to Kunming this way.
Yeah.
And of course, this is all controlled by the Japanese.
Right. So obviously Stilwell was in there with the Americans. Was Ord Wingate was the British guy? Was he over that area?
He's one that was there.
Did you ever meet any of those guys or see them?
No, I didn't. But General Stilwell, of course, was our commander, and we had some difficulties, I think, in that sense, in trying to. I guess it happened in Europe too, but trying to coordinate the British Indian, because of course Great Britain, India belonged to Great Britain at the time. That was Great Britain. So the British and the Indians and ourselves, and then the Chinese, trying to do this whole coordination on one effort. It's difficult, and that's where the communications come in so importantly.
And in India itself, they were looking to break away from England in the first place.
So
a lot of them were
Not
kind of
only-
happy all this stuff
yeah.
was going on, were they not?
Yes, and it was.
Could you see that in their troops or anything like that?
Yes, you could see that India. I was guessing for sure that India would. Well, as soon as I got on my troop ship to go home, the first thing I said to anybody that wanted to hear about it, I said, it won't be long before India becomes independent, because they're ready for independence and they're going to strike for it. But it was further complicated in this war effort because, you see, Chiang Kai-shek was the ruler of China, and Mao Zedong had a lot of followers and a lot of troops. I think in a certain part of China, just waiting to take over, and so I think Chiang Kai-shek had to keep looking over his shoulder at Mao Zedong, but straight ahead there was a war going on, and he was part of that war. If we could get that airlift going to him and get the road open, which we did, and so finally, China was now a partner of ours, and the war began to go our way.
Right.
We began to win the war, and so some people say, "Wow, there was a lot of loss of life to do this, wasn't there?" Yes, a lot of pilots were shot down, a lot of our men were lost, and in building the road and in flying over the hump, we lost a lot of people. Was there anything other than just bringing the Chinese into Burma? Was there any other reason why you were doing this, the flying the hump and doing all of this and the loss of life? Yes, there was another reason. Because after the war, everybody knew that the war was going to end be won in Europe, and the next major combat area to end this war was the invasion of Japan. So how do we get to these bases, these Chinese bases that we needed? We needed Chinese bases, and how do we get there and establish them and so forth, and strike Japan for the second invasion, like Normandy? And we get there through the Burma Road. We go there through airlift and through Burma Road and through the Chinese help. Chinese as an ally, a solid ally, and we get there and we can establish bases in China, and we can have regular bombardment just like we did for Germany, bombardments over Tokyo or anywhere else.
Right.
However, along came the atomic bomb.
Right, yeah.
After this was all being set up, the bomb was dropped and it was all over.
Okay, let's back up then a little bit. How did they build the road? How did they physically? What's the mechanism? And what was it? Macadam? Was it dirt? Was it rocks? how did they do that?
As I remember it all, it's mainly a dirt, mainly carved out bulldozer-wise with dirt through the hills, through the jungles, and there was a big enemy of building this road were the monsoons. We had 2 monsoon seasons, winter and summer, and building the road was difficult, but it was done. It was done.
Wasn't you were talking about? I think malaria was a big factor.
Yes, disease, other diseases too, but malaria was the biggest one. That our, at least my platoon, I think, just about everybody came down with something, mainly malaria, and eventually, that is. So they,
And you mentioned what did they tell you when you first got over
that
there?
you were going to, that I was going to end up with it. But what could I do? I couldn't resign.
Right.
So, but I, knock on wood, the female Anopheles mosquito did not strike, and I did not.
But you said you took that,
Atabrine.
and apparently didn't have quinine at that time. But
Atabrine was very effective. At least it was for me, I guess. Or it was for everybody, really. You would become yellow. Your skin would turn yellow, but it wouldn't stop you from getting malaria. But it would keep you, keep you in action. You wouldn't be hospitalized.
Be as bad.
You wouldn't be hospitalized until you quit taking Atabrine, and then you came down full-blown malaria, and then of course you were hospitalized.
And then, okay, so when you got there, then what was your job?
My job, I was, well, all of our outfit was, our job was to set up communications between India, between Assam and Kunming. So part of our outfit went on to Kunming. Others, I was in Assam.
Okay, I should ask, but when you got there, was the road completed then?
Yes, the road was had just been completed, and I can't remember just how long, but we were getting supplies over the road.
Now your communications, did that go like through telegraph poles or?
Yeah, we had various. We had radio, and we had teletype, and radio teletype, and telephone. Those were the main communications, and as I mentioned, telex, teletype. Most anything on a piece of paper coming out of a machine was coded. It was encoded. And now telephone was not. That was not a very good way to do it. Because you couldn't talk, you couldn't speak in code.
Oh, right, yeah. Yeah, I guess so. But everything had to go through the lines. I guess radio. Did radio have to also?
No, not radio, no.
Okay. So why use all this other stuff? Why just not use it? Well, I guess I see. Because on radio you'd have to speak it as well.
Yeah.
So your coded stuff had to go through lines. And of
Yeah.
course the Japanese were trying to cut the lines all the time.
That was the best way to do it. And if they didn't break your code, great. And you get a nice clear message. You get a nice clear message through. And of course you get a piece of paper. I mean, at the other end, a piece of paper comes out.
So it'd be like a fax.
Yeah, it'd be like a fax. It comes out, and so you've got a record. You got to have some kind of a record of who ordered me to do what. Or who ordered us to do what.
Yeah.
Why are we out here? Well, we've got it. Well, here it is. These are orders from Delhi.
So there would be a little machine like it, say at the other, you send it.
Yeah, we'd have.
And it would print out what came over.
Sure, right.
How did that work? What was the mechanism? I mean, how did that?
That worked on by lines, like telephone lines, and
I mean,
teletype.
I'm not real familiar with a teletype machine.
Teletype.
does what makes it work? I mean, it gets does it? It has keys that
Yes,
just print,
right,
or does
right.
someone else? I mean,
No,
does it do it all itself?
Yes, no. You can cut on a teletype machine. What you can do is you can cut yourself first a tape. You know, a ribbon. You cut yourself a tape of the message, and well, first of all, your coding room will give you something to cut. That'll be a coded message. And you can cut a tape. This is merely if you want to do it. You can send it by hand, but the best thing I think is to cut a tape, and then you can run that tape. You can run that tape to see if it came out right. You know, proofread it, see if it came out right,
Yeah.
because it's going to be decoded at the other end. These are combat orders, and so you can then you're all set. So of course on your machine, you can signal. You can send your signal for it. It's like it's going to Kunming, China. Maybe you're going to Bama or wherever. You can get your station, call them, get their call in, and see if they answer. But sometimes our stations there in Burma, small relay stations, sometimes they have been overrun by the Japanese, you know, and see if they acknowledge your call, and if they do, you're free to send your message, and usually relayed message for Kunming, and you can pop your tape in and run it, and it'll come out. If a Japanese is receiving it, for example, in one of the stations, if he is receiving it, it's not going to mean anything to him unless he can break the code.
Did that happen often?
Breaking the code? We don't know. We don't think so. We don't think so. We were pretty good at it. The United States was pretty good at it, but I don't think the Japanese were as good as the United States.
Because we had broken theirs
Yeah.
a couple times.
Yeah, I think we were good at it.
Yeah.
But at that time, back in those days, now the Japanese probably would be superior at it, but then I don't think they were.
So were you in Assam then doing this work?
Yes. I was in Assam, and our outfit, we
Okay.
we
What outfit were you in? Yeah. Let's.
Yeah, that's it.
You were in the.
I'll have to
Okay.
just dig into my records, because our outfit numbers changed while we were there.
But the overall Army group that you were in.
Well, I was Army Signal Corps, of course.
Oh, okay. Army
Yeah,
Signal.
Army Signal Corps. Our battalion number and so forth changed after we got overseas. It didn't matter to us.
Yeah.
You know.
Okay. So were you in Assam the whole time that you were over there?
Yes, we got into Burma briefly. I did. I was in Burma, but this was not for permanent assignment. And but
What did you do when you went into Burma?
just to check to see how things were being set up, and how things were going, and to get kind of an intelligence report. Yeah. But as far as my station, and my responsible station was Assam.
Did the Japanese did you have any bombing attacks in Assam?
Prior to my arriving, I'm quite sure they did. Yes.
But not while you were there.
But now I was there. No. We went. We maintained our station without any air raids.
So.
But they were working on. They didn't have to really come to the source, the Japanese. They could. What they want to do is infiltrate along the road, down the ways, and cut lines, things. Though sometimes the heavy monsoons would wash our poles down the hills, but all the Japanese had to do were infiltrate. Small groups of Japanese could infiltrate and cut lines, and or maybe even attack one of our relay stations, and kill them, you know, the GIs over there.
Right. When you were there, did any USO shows come over your way?
Not in Assam. We didn't see any of them.
Uh-huh.
No, I think maybe they were in Delhi and in Calcutta, places like that, but not for us. No.
Is this a real town?
It's
You're
Assam
like in,
province.
You're
It's a
like
province.
in the jungle, right?
It's a jungle province.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is
It's pretty
Assam.
primitive.
Assam is where before the war, Assam was where if you wanted to go on a tiger hunt, you know, if you had a lot of money, with the Maharajas, for example, they could, or any group with a lot of money, you wanted to go tiger hunting, you know, before the war. Assam was the best place to go. You go there when they had the elephants and everything, and the Indian help, and you would certainly you wouldn't have to work too hard to bag a tiger. That was all tiger country, and so that's what it was. It's a jungle area in the north, not far from the Tibet, not far from the Himalayas, but down in the jungles.
What was the weather like there in Assam? Was that kind of humid?
Very difficult because it was extreme humidity and heat, and two monsoons. We had so much water, it was just unbelievable. It was always water and mud, and of course that's what a jungle is anyway.
Yeah. Do you remember when you first heard about the Hiroshima, about the atomic bomb?
Yes. Yes, I was in a message center on the Assam Burma border, and I was standing there with some buddies, and we were standing by a teletype machine, and there was a message coming up from Calcutta, from Delhi via Calcutta. There was a message coming in, and the message said, and this was not coded, this was all in English, and the message told us, it was being forwarded on, of course, up to Kunming, China, I guess, but we saw it earlier as it came across a relay station. It said that it explained that a bomb had been dropped in Hiroshima, and they called it an atomic bomb, and they explained, I think the message explained, so we would know what an atomic bomb is. It explained it's the equivalent of, and then it said how much TNT it was the equivalent of, and we didn't believe it because we knew TNT, we knew that, we knew the force of TNT, but when it explained the equivalent in TNT language, we said, that's all wrong. That can't be. No bomb is this, and we kind of laughed about it. We didn't really laugh, but we kind of said, there's a big mistake here. There isn't a bomb that could be anywhere near that much TNT. Well, obviously, the next day it was confirmed. It's not a mistake. It was confirmed, and it was especially confirmed when we learned that Hiroshima was destroyed. And then a couple of days later, when Nagasaki was destroyed, then the war is over. Then we knew, forget the Burma Road, forget bases in China, forget the invasion of Japan. We're going home.
What did you think about that?
I thought I just saved my life. Because most of us thought that there were estimates of 2 million of us would be killed in the invasion of Japan. And certainly we were going to be part of it. And I thought, well, saved by the bell. Saved by the bomb.
And there were probably hundreds of thousands of guys that felt the same way.
Yeah.
Okay, so
I was so sorry for the airmen that had flying that hump. They worked so hard flying all the supplies into China, you know, and they went down in the jungle. After the war was over, there was talk about forming a battalion, I guess, of the war had ended. Japan had surrendered, and we were still there. And and there was talk about forming volunteer groups. Americans volunteered to go into the jungles of Burma. Now that the war was over, go into the jungles of Burma and see if we couldn't find, because not all the airmen were dead, we thought, and so see if we couldn't find the airmen that were still alive, and if we couldn't find them, we could find their aircraft, and at least we'd gather their dog tags and so forth, and bring them back, and bring back their remains. So when I heard that we were going to form this group, the Americans, volunteers, well then I wanted to volunteer. Although I hated I mean the thought of, I wanted to volunteer for the mission, but I didn't want. Although I thought that was a heck of a place to go into for a long period of time, because maybe you're not going to come out of there. And I thought, well, I could, I've lasted this long, I could maybe do some good. Maybe I could even find an airman or two, along with other GIs with me. Maybe we could find some airmen and save them. And so that was our thought. But I tried it on my parents for size, I said, I'm thinking of maybe going in and looking for airmen, and my mother said, what? Oh, she says, I think maybe, you're the only son we have. Maybe you better think this over twice, please. And so I went home.
Okay. So when did you arrive home there, and how did you get back home? Did you say?
Of course, then I went south to Calcutta, where I had to wait. The Indian government, was very upset with certain factions of us, and they were about to go for their independence anyway against the British. So they said, okay, now here's how the war's over. We won, hooray! Now here's how we want all of you out of India. We want the black American out of India first. Reason? A lot of the black Americans that came over there had a chip on their shoulders because they felt they had been very mistreated in the United States, that they were second-class citizens in America. And they went over there and they had somebody else to kick around, and this time it was the Indian. And they did. Some blacks kicked the Indians around, and they were very cruel to the Indians, because now they weren't back in the States and people calling them certain names. Now they had somebody to kick around. So the Indians never forgot that. The Indians said, black Americans out first, British out next, American whites last. Last out of India. So I had to go down to Calcutta and spend a long time, I don't know, weeks, I guess. Weeks. I stayed in an orphanage, what was an orphanage, Dum Dum Orphanage in Calcutta. I stayed there waiting for my...
Dum Dum?
Yeah, D-U-M. And I spent some time there in the Dum Dum Orphanage. I don't know where the orphans went, but anyway, the orphanage was available to me, and waiting for my troop ship, which was the Marine Jumper. That was my troop ship home. Marine Jumper.
Marine, M-A-R-I-N-E?
Marine and Jumper.
J-U-M-P-E-R?
Marine Jumper was
the name of the troop ship?
Yes, that's the name of the troop ship. These were those troop ships built up
Okay.
in...
Did you go around in Calcutta much while you were waiting? Did you see much of the city?
Yes. I got a chance to visit a bit in Calcutta, and then I also went over to Delhi, New Delhi, and to Agra to see the Taj Mahal. So I had time to do those things while waiting for my troop ship.
Tell me about the Taj Mahal.
It's certainly worth visiting. It really is a wonder of the world.
Explain it to me. I'm not quite sure exactly what it is.
Well, the Taj Mahal was built for an Indian queen, and a long time ago, and that was to be her tomb, and of course that part of of course there wasn't a Pakistan then, it was all India,
so where is it exactly?
It's in Agra, A-G-R-A, and it was it was that was the mausoleum. That was the memory of for the Queen, and it took.
So it wasn't like a palace. I mean, she didn't live in it when she was
No,
alive.
no. It's a tomb,
Yeah.
and it took 20,000. I think they said it took 20,000 coolies, 20 years to do it, to build it. 20 years, and I don't remember the dates of when it was built, but they're probably even in some of this literature. But it is one of the wonders of the world, and I really enjoyed visiting it. You must, of course, remove your shoes when you go in there and so forth, you know. And
Was it colorful inside? I mean, is it painted and stuff like that?
yes, it's beautiful. It's a great, enormous and beautiful structure, and it's worth. It's a wonder of the world. It's worth being there. It's worth seeing. So I had a chance to visit it, and which is very worthwhile. And then I got to Lahore, Lahore now is in Pakistan, but then it was India. And Lahore is a very pretty town, village, town, and it's in the cooler part of that region. You get out of that awful heat, and it was nice to be there in a cool part of India. And so then I worked my way back from Lahore and Agra and so forth, all the way back to Calcutta to catch my transportation and got aboard the Marine Jumper.
Was Calcutta, you think of it as having some of the poorest people in the world and stuff like
Yes.
that? Was it? Did you find
Very
that
much so. They told me, and I believe it, that they welcome famines because they welcome people dying, and I saw some people dead. I'm sure. As I walked around, there were people lying in doorways that I think were dead, and they welcome famines because then it gives those that are still alive more to eat, and because then they were having so many famines and still are, I think, to a degree, that it's just the population is. There's somebody for every square foot. I mean, there isn't any open space. You walk the sidewalks of Calcutta are just like this. They're shoulder to shoulder, and the thing is, at that time, I don't know how it is now, but at that time, the beggars were out too, and the lepers were out, but they would touch you. The lepers would touch you, and you'd be walking in the street as I did, and they would touch your hand and ask for money. You know, of course, I gave them money, but as I gave money, more lepers would arrive, and they would touch you, and then you would look over into a doorway here and a doorway there, and I don't know, but I think some of those people definitely were not alive.
Were you concerned about getting leprosy for these people touching?
And how we were concerned about or any other disease that they might have when they certainly had all their diseases there.
Was Gandhi? Was he dead? Was he still alive? Was Gandhi?
Gandhi was alive.
Was
Yeah,
he?
Gandhi was alive. Yeah.
Had you heard much about him? What was your thoughts of him at that time?
Well,
Did you think anything
my
about it?
thoughts I knew first of all that India had it with British rule. I knew that, so that was gonna change, and then I noticed also in dealing with the Indian soldiers and civilians and so forth. That I noticed the terrible hatred that existed between the Hindus and the Muslims, and yet they were all in India. And of course, the separation brought Pakistan, when the development or the initiation of Pakistan brought that brought it to a halt by having a country for the Muslims and a country for the Hindu, for the Indian. But the hatred was terrible when they were all in India, and I think it's still terrible now that even though they're side by side in Pakistan and India, I think the hatred is maybe even worse.
Yeah.
So it's a political. It's always been a political bomb and a religious bomb, and it's like Israel. It's like the Palestinians and Israel. It's there. It's a religious and political hatred that is unbelievable. And I've been in my working career. I've been to Israel, and it reminded me of India and Pakistan.
Several years ago, PBS, I believe it was, had a kind of a mini series, and I think it was called The Raj, something about the Raj. I don't know if you saw that or not. It was about India in the 30s and during the war, and up until, actually pretty much up until the breakup and all that. And I thought it was very good. I don't know if you ever saw it or not.
No, I don't. I think I missed it.
Okay, so when you leave Calcutta, then where did you end up in the United States when you came back?
The Marine Jumper took us home via Singapore, and we couldn't get off just for supplies, and I landed in Seattle, and from Seattle I went to Camp McCoy, Wisconsin, where I was discharged from the service in Camp McCoy.
And yeah, obviously you went back.
I went back to Detroit.
To Detroit, and then what did you do back?
In Detroit, my parents said that I was planning to go to the University of Michigan, and my parents said that was fine. I could go to the University of Michigan, of course, but they were, for health reasons, they were going to move to either Arizona or Southern California, and they were favoring Southern California. So I felt really terrible about having been away for 3 years, and I was so young, and I had already been away 3 years, and I said, well, I want to go along with you. I don't have to go to the University of Michigan. So I sent letters to schools out here, to Cal, Stanford, SC, and UCLA, and with housing, everything was very difficult. But UCLA, they came through with a real nice letter and said, if you can arrange your own housing, if you have housing was so hard to get, if you can arrange your own housing, we'll admit you into UCLA. And so we moved as a family. We moved out to Southern California, and I went to UCLA, and that's where I met my wife.
Where did the family move to then?
We were in. We had an apartment, or rather a home. We had a home not far from Westlake Park, there in Los Angeles area. I had a home over there.
Westlake Park. What like?
Westlake. Is
was
it
it very far from Westwood?
Westlake or MacArthur? Maybe it's called MacArthur Park. Yeah, it's. Let's see. Major streets would be like Alvarado and Wilshire Boulevard. That might be called MacArthur Park. Yeah, I think it is.
How far from UCLA is it?
From UCLA, it's a good long way. Wow, in miles. I don't know. It's got to be. Well, I know. Let's see. It would take me. If I had a car, I was hitchhiking some of the time, and it would take us half an hour to get to school.
Yeah, I guess I should ask you, when did you get your first car? Did you have one in high school?
Well, I always used my dad's car, but when I had my very own car was after I graduated from UCLA in 1949.
What was that?
And I bought a 1949 Chevy convertible.
Oh.
Yeah, I knew it. Well, my dad helped me out with the payments, with the money, rather.
What kind of car did your when you were a kid? Did your parents have?
The cars that he owned that I was driving. Let's see, I started driving his cars when he had. Well, I guess he taught me to drive on a Model A Ford. That's when I was really a punk kid with a Model A Ford, and then he had a 1938 Ford that I drove a lot. 1938 Ford. By then I was just going getting ready to go into high school, I guess. And he had a nice 38 Ford was a neat car at that time.
So then you met Judy?
Joan.
Joan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I met Joan at UCLA. As a matter of fact, she's one of the first dates I had because.
What was her last name?
Halperin, Halperin. And Joan, on campus, when I arrived on campus at UCLA, I didn't know anybody, not one person. But you know, at that age, so what, you know? So I didn't know a single person. And here I am walking from Royce Hall down to another class, and not knowing anybody, just these faces passing me, and I never saw anybody. But all of a sudden, here comes a face that I recognize. And I look at him, and he looks at me, and it was an old buddy that I had met in the service. He wasn't, not over in India, but I had met him when I was at Camp Crowder, Missouri. A mutual friend from Detroit. We had a weekend where we got together. They were Air Force guys, and I was Army. And this fella, Warner Gable, I looked at him, and he looked at me. We had an immediate recognition, of course. And he was from Chicago. And he said to me, he said, "What are you doing here?" Knowing I was from Detroit. And I said, "What am I doing here? What are you doing here?" And he said, "Oh my gosh," he said, "isn't this something? We both end up at UCLA." And he said, "Look," he said, "are you in a fraternity yet?" And I said, "No, I'm just starting out. I just got here. I'm a couple of months now." And he said, "I am the rush chairman for Sigma Nu fraternity." He said, "You come over. We're going to have a beer bus tomorrow. You come on over. I'll introduce you to all the guys." I said, "Okay, I'll be there." So I went to the beer bus. They're a terrific bunch of guys, a mixture of younger people and veterans and GIs, you know. And they had a terrific bunch of guys. So I joined Sigma Nu. And after joining Sigma Nu, we had an exchange. You know, we had parties with various sororities. So the first exchange that we had was with Delta Gamma. And the Delta Gammas came over to our house to have a beer bust and have dinner and so forth. And what the Delta Gammas and the Sigma Nus did was they took the two rosters and they put them side by side, and your name, whomever your name was matched up with, that was your date for the evening. Well, I looked at the rosters and I saw that my name was matched up with a girl named Joan Halperin. So I wonder who she is. Well, I found out. We had a pretty good time that night, not a sensational time. But then the next time that we had another exchange with the Delta Gammas, they slapped the rosters together again, and I have Joan again. And I don't know whether she was very happy about it. I was thinking to myself, how am I ever going to meet any of the other girls if I always have Joan, you know, for a date? But that night, the second time we were together, we had a fabulous time, really a fabulous time. And that really started out not only a great friendship, but it ended up in 50 years of marriage. Which will be 50 years, will be the end of this year.
Oh.
December 29 we'll be married 50 years.
Oh.
I graduated in 49 and Joan graduated in 1950. She was an art major, and I was...
What's it, December the which? December?
I graduated...
No, your wedding date.
Oh, wedding date? December 29 of this year is our 50th.
Yeah. And what was your major?
I was in what they call Latin American Studies. That's part of the International Relations Department. And I picked that one very carefully because I wanted to work in Latin America. That was the field I had selected, obviously, to use my Spanish, and it worked out fine because when I went to Douglas Aircraft and got into sales there, well, the first thing they did was assign me to sales in Latin America. So it was and Joan graduated in 1950. She was an art major and became a professional artist.
Oh.
And sold a lot of paintings.
What kind of art did she like to do?
She does. Of course, she works in all media. She works in oils, and she does charcoal and ink drawings, and her seascapes are a big specialty, and things of that nature. Flowers. She was the feature artist at Bullock's Westwood some years ago. She was their feature artist, and she sold paintings to a lot of people, a lot of places in Southern California.
Did she go down to Latin America with you?
She's been in Latin America. Yeah, and we lived in Rio. That was our first overseas assignment. We lived in Brazil when we had a child. Our first son was 1 year old, and Douglas had me go to that office in Brazil, and we stayed there 3 years in Brazil.
So you're 3 from what years were you?
Brazil was Brazil was 57 to 60.
Okay, let's back up just a second. Okay, you graduated. How soon did you start working for Douglas after you graduated? And you graduated in 1949, did you say?
I graduated in 49, and I was working for Douglas the following year, I guess.
Did you just go apply there, or what?
I started. Well, I had a short stint at a pharmaceutical company called Nyan Corporation in Hollywood. They wanted an export manager for their Latin American market. I started there, but I didn't really want to do pharmaceuticals. I just didn't want to do that for a career. So so a fraternity brother was over at Douglas in sales, and he said, "Why don't you come on over? We need salespeople here." So that's how I went to Douglas, and I spent 10 years with them.
Yeah. Okay. So you started like in 1950.
Yeah, it could have been in early '51.
Okay. And okay, you went to Brazil in 1957. So what did you do with 51 to 57? The first 6 years, 5 or 6 years.
I went to. I worked in Santa Monica, in there, Douglas, Santa Monica.
Oh.
Yeah. I was at home base.
Yeah. And what did you
But
do?
handling Latin American accounts, but at home, not well, traveling some. Yes, I traveled some to Latin America, but not as extensively as other salespersons.
So then in 57 you went to Brazil.
In '57, I went to Brazil, and we had a
To
two-man
Rio?
to Rio. We had a two-man office in Rio, and the two of us were responsible. Douglas had us responsible for all of Latin America. It was a lot. While he was for airplanes and for spare parts, because we did a big business in spare parts, and so he'd be on the road when I was at home, because at home, I mean, in Brazil, because Brazil was one of our major customers. I mean, we had several airlines in Brazil that bought airplanes and spare parts in quantity. So we had to have Brazil covered. So one of us would stay home, and the other one would travel around Chile, Argentina, et cetera, and then when he got back, well, then the other would go. So that's how we worked it for 3 years. So I wasn't home very much, and neither was he. But we sold airplanes, and we sold a lot of spare parts. So we brought in a lot of money for Douglas. But then at the end of that, by the end of 3 years, we wanted to go home, and we did. We went home in '60.
Mm-hmm.
back to sales department in Santa Monica. But at that same time, as soon as we arrived home, Lockheed had heard about me in Latin America, and they had run into me. When Lockheed would come down with sales teams, they would run into me in Rio, and I got to know a lot of the guys. And so when they heard that I had returned to the States, they asked me if I would come over and join They formed a new company called Lockheed Aircraft International, LAI, and they were this large office was in downtown Los Angeles, and they said they wanted me to come down there and handle Latin America for them. So we talked, and I went, and that was the beginning of my Lockheed career. I started with Latin America.
Did you go to Latin America again with Lockheed? Or?
I traveled to Latin America for Lockheed, to all the countries, all the customers, air forces and airlines.
But you didn't move down there.
I didn't
like
move. I didn't move down there, I did that. I did that until. Let's see. I guess that was until 1968. Well, 1968. The Lockheed asked me, Lockheed California company asked me if I'd come over, and we had just launched a new airplane, the L-1011 TriStar, and for commercial airlines, and they asked me if I'd come over and join that sales force, but instead of working Latin America, if I'd come over and work Southern Europe for them, because they were thinking of Spain and Portugal. And I said, fine, I did, because it was still Lockheed, just one division after another. So I was traveling to Europe out of Southern California, for on the L-1011, that was about 68, 69, 70, about 3 years or so, 3 or 4 years, and then Lockheed, 3 years ago. Then Lockheed decided that they wanted to set up offices overseas in various parts of the world to intensify our sales campaign. In other words, have our salespeople living with the customer instead of flying from Southern California over there. And so I thought that was a good idea. So they asked me to open the office in Madrid, a Lockheed office in Madrid, which would be responsible for Madrid and Portugal, and then eventually Southern Europe and maybe Middle East. So I agreed to that, and we opened the office of course we went over as a family. By then we had 3 children, and they were of course all in school. They were 10th grade, 7th grade, and 4th grade, and so it was really an important move. And so we moved over to Spain.
What was the name of your kids?
Our names?
Yeah, the children.
The eldest is Michael, and then the next child is Linda, and then Danny. And we in 1971 we set up the office, and in Madrid. We set it up in Madrid, and we started working very hard on airlines, not just the airlines over there, but also the air forces, because we were selling our military airplanes too, like the C-130s. And so we stayed in Spain. We worked that office, and we lived in Spain for 11 years. The children, all 3 of our children, started there, as I mentioned, in high school, middle school, and elementary school, and all 3 of them graduated from high school in Spain. and they went on to college in the United States. But after 11 years, we closed the office, and Lockheed asked me to either to take my pick between going to Paris, Lockheed Paris, or Coral Gables, Florida, which was our Latin American office. So we knew a lot about. We had been to Paris a lot, and although Paris is a beautiful place, I didn't really care for living there that much. So we decided, after Lockheed asked me to go visit Coral Gables to see if I didn't want to go to Paris, to visit Coral Gables, see if that's satisfactory. Well, everybody said, "Oh, you're not going to like Florida. It's terrible. It's buggy. It's hot and sticky." Well, we went and we loved it. Our visit, we loved it, and we liked Coral Gables, and we liked where we were going to buy an apartment, which was Key Biscayne, Florida. So we said we'll take that office. We'll take Coral Gables. So we did, and we lived in Florida. Of course, I traveled Latin America all over again, like I used to do for Douglas. Traveled it all over again for Lockheed, and for 5 years, and we were there until I retired. I came home. Well, I came home to headquarters in Calabasas, stayed a few years, and then retired.
Okay. So what year did you retire then?
I retired in '88.
When your kids went to high school over in Spain, did they go to Spanish schools or did they go to American schools?
Yeah, they went to the American School of Madrid, which is a very fine school, and but it's not all taught in Spanish, but you do have Spanish classes there, and but it's the American School of Madrid.
And where do your kids live now?
Michael, the eldest, has an office in New York with REFCO, R-E-F-C-O, REFCO, and
What do they do?
he's in international commodities, and he travels the world, and he has a home. His wife and his daughter live in Aspen, Colorado, and so he divides his time. In New York, he works like Monday through Wednesday, and then he has an office in his home in Aspen for the rest of the week. And if he's not either in New York or Aspen, well, then he's somewhere overseas. And our son Danny is also in Colorado. He's the general manager of a plant owned by a National Geographic Society in the Denver area, and it's a map-making plant. And he's the general manager there, but he travels a lot also internationally. And our daughter, Linda, lives in Los Angeles, and she's a professional photographer and does a lot of work with mainly with schools that like bring in photographers to take pictures of all the children and offer them to the parents and so forth.
Yeah.
She has a lot of business doing that.
Yeah.
That's what she has.
And how many grandchildren do you have?
And we have Linda has 2 boys, and Michael has a daughter, and Danny is going to have a daughter next month.
Oh, okay.
So we will have 4.
We'll say you have 4.
Yeah, 4.
Okay.
So we have 2 boys and 2 girls.
So, what did you do after? Were you living in Calabasas then when you retired?
We were living near Calabasas because the headquarters was in Calabasas. For
Where
Lockheed.
were you living?
We were
then?
living in Agora Hills.
And had you started coming to the desert during that time?
Yes. Well, we only made a couple of visits in our. And all the time we spent in Southern California, we only made a couple of visits to the desert, but we were very impressed with the desert and thought that it certainly was a candidate for retirement.
Mm-hmm.
But But after our long experience, long working experience, which lasted 37 years of international sales, we also thought that we had a good life in Florida. Coral Gate was in Key Biscayne. We liked that a lot. We were members of the Key Biscayne Yacht Club and really nice people. We gave that serious consideration, but we ended up in briefly in Mission Viejo, briefly for retirement, but that was only for a few years, and then went on to Pinehurst, North Carolina.
Oh, you did?
Uh-huh.
Oh.
And the reason we went on to Pinehurst, North Carolina, which we enjoyed a lot, was because Joan's sister lives there, and her mother used to live there. When we were living in Spain, her mother was also living there in Pinehurst, North Carolina, and when we flew home on home leave from Madrid to California, we would always stop off in North Carolina and visit for a while. So that ended up as our key retirement place, and so we built a home. We built a home on Lake Pinehurst and joined the Pinehurst Country Club. We were having a great life there. But the difficulty for us was that Pinehurst is hard to get to. You can't fly into Pinehurst. If you're coming from Los Angeles, you fly to Raleigh, and you have to drive an hour and a half to 2 hours from Raleigh down to Pinehurst. It's a long trip and it's a hard trip. And we weren't seeing our kids. Our family, they just couldn't make it. They were all working and they had children and so forth. They just couldn't make it. So we thought we better not stay in Pinehurst because our kids are all grown up and our grandchildren are grown up. We're not even seeing them. So we decided, we sold our home in Pinehurst after 6 or 7 years, and we sold the house and came here.
What year was that you came here then?
We came here just last August.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
2000.
Yeah, August 2000. We took a rental there and took a rental in the Chaparral Country Club while we paraded all up and down the valley with a very good Remax salesman and found the house that we wanted.
And where's that?
And that's in a gated community called Sun Terrace, all one word, and it's over near Hoveley and Cook. Sun Terrace, all one word.
R-A-C-E, Sun Terrace.
Yeah, Sun Terrace, but it's all one word.
Right. Yeah. Okay. And do you play golf around here too?
Yes, I'm a member of Desert Willow. As you know, that's owned by the city, by Palm
Yes.
Desert. So I have a membership there, which allows me to play for $45 in season, and I guess it'll be less when it's out of season.
Yeah. That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Joan still does some painting and stuff.
No, she doesn't paint anymore because she had painting brought it all on. She had some spinal fusion, and some other delicate surgery on her spine, and it all came from painting, and so her days of. But we have a lot of her artwork hanging in our house, and so it's nice.
What is she able to play golf?
No, she doesn't. She did try it for a while, but it's very limiting.
Does she have any other interest in taking the place of her painting?
Well, she's in Spain. Yes, both in Spain but particularly in Pinehurst. She was the social chair, like in Pinehurst. She was social chairman of the college club and social chairman of the Lake Pinehurst Association, and she arranged all our parties and Christmas parties and everything. She did a great job in doing that. So she has those interests.
I'm sure.
She has interests like that.
Yeah.
But as far as she can't paint or play golf, but she likes to do everything else.
Yeah. I was going to ask, when you said in Florida you belonged to a yacht club, did you have a boat and stuff?
We didn't have a boat, but we were members, of course, and we
sailboats or other kind did you like to
The
go out?
the boats they had there, it's a small yacht club, the Key Biscayne Yacht Club. It's very small, but they had very nice boats. It was.
I mean, did you like the power boats or the sailboats better? Or?
I guess I liked power boats best of all. And we had a boat in Pinehurst. We were living on Lake Pinehurst, and we had one of those pontoon boats.
Yeah.
Party boats.
Oh yeah.
They're fun to have.
Yeah. So from here, have your kids been to visit you since you've been here?
Yes, they have. They've all been here.
Yeah.
And
they like it here too.
yeah, they love it. They love it.
Yeah,
And we'll be having. They are arranging, and we're helping them arrange the 50th anniversary party, which will be for immediate family only, at our insistence, because we didn't want to. We both went to UCLA, and Joan's sorority sisters are all over the place, and my fraternity brothers are here and there, and gee, who are you going to leave out at a party like this?
Yeah.
So, I mean, we just didn't want to risk it. So it's going to be family members only.
Where's it going to be?
And we don't know yet. We don't know yet.
I'm sure.
But it'll be just the immediate family, and so it'll be a small party, and it'll be in
Those are
December.
the best kind.
Yeah, and I think so.
Well, congratulations in advance.
Well, thank you
Thank you
very
so
much.
Really enjoyed
Thank you.
talking to you.
Thank
That
you.
was great.
Thank you.
Did fun.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you.
Pleasure.
Okay. Very nice.